Now in our 25th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, you have found This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1335, with a release and air date of Saturday, September 27, 2024. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
On the air on the amateur bands around the world, podcasting and streaming on the internet since 1993, serving the amateur radio community with weekly, reliable, amateur radio news and special features. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1335 of This Week in Amateur Radio. As we come to air, this very active weather week finds amateur radio operators passing vital communications for two deadly hurricanes. We will have the details. The ARRL's affiliation with Grouper appears to be very popular. The 105th anniversary of WWV will be celebrated with a special event station. Scientists want to change solar forecast reporting characteristics. Poland requests clear HF frequencies due to widespread flooding response. Amateur radio and a robot play baseball. A young ladies' radio club in New Zealand calls it quits. AMSAT's GreenCube satellite ceases functioning due to space radiation damage. Sunita Williams, KD5PLB, takes over as commander of the International Space Station. The president of the Radio Amateurs of Canada resigns. Scientists run a tricky maneuver with Voyager 1, switching its main thrusters. The White House tasks NASA to develop a way to tell time on the moon. And, if you need the state of Wyoming for any reason, amateurs there will be on the air looking to make contacts. We will tell you the details in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will talk about dark sky for amateur radio. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, will be here with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us back in time to the early 1900s for a look at cooperation in QRM as the relaying of messages continues to develop across the United States. We will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions and upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio just outside New York's capital city, this is W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, in the Geek Cave studios, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting this week from my ham shack, where every time I fire up the 80-meter transmitter, my wife's book light blinks on and off. She finds it very annoying. Oh well, carry on. I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, where we are drying out from Helene, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our Troy, New York news bureau, where this week the New England aster bloomed, I'm Eric, KD2RJX.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the song of the chainsaw is heard throughout the land, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where summer and autumn have entered their annual battle, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
And now, with our lead story, here is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
Leading off our news this week, as of Thursday evening, September 26, 2024, Hurricane Helene had been upgraded to a Category 4 storm by the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane Helene made landfall near Perry, Florida, on Thursday evening as a Category 4 storm. With winds of 140 miles per hour, it's the strongest hurricane on record to slam into Florida's Big Bend. More than 2.2 million customers don't have power across Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, according to PowerOutage.us. The National Hurricane Center reports the storm has weakened to a tropical storm as it moves further inland, with winds of 70 miles per hour, and as of this reporting is located about 40 miles east of Macon, Georgia, and about 100 miles southeast of Atlanta, Georgia. Helene is moving toward the north near 30 miles per hour. A turn toward the north is expected as of this reporting, taking the center over central and northeastern Georgia. After that, the storm is expected to turn northwestward and slow down over the Tennessee Valley later today and Saturday. Tropical storm-force winds extend outward up to 275 miles, mainly to the east of the center. The Hurricane WatchNet closed operations for Hurricane Helene at 11 o'clock a.m. Friday. During this 25-hour event, members of the Hurricane WatchNet collected and forwarded over 100 surface reports to the National Hurricane Center. With more details on Hurricane Helene and the amateur radio response, we go to League headquarters, where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this special report.
It is expected to strengthen and bring catastrophic winds and storm surge to the northeastern Gulf Coast. Helene was located about 200 miles from Tampa, Florida, with winds of 128 miles per hour. More than 200,000 residents and businesses are without power there. The storm is moving towards the north-northeast at 23 miles per hour. This general motion is expected to continue with a significant increase in forward speed during the next 24 hours. And on that forecast track was expected to cross the Florida Big Bend coast late Thursday evening. And after landfall, Helene is expected to turn northwestward and slow down over the Tennessee Valley on Friday and Saturday. Weakening is expected after landfall, but Helene's fast forward speed will allow for strong, damaging winds, especially in gusts, to penetrate well inland across the southeastern United States, including over the higher terrain of the southern Appalachians. The Hurricane WatchNet was activated Thursday morning at 10 a.m. on both 14.325 MHz and 7.268 MHz, and they also will activate on Friday, September 27th. The VoIP Hurricane Net was also activated at 10 a.m. on Thursday Eastern Daylight Time and will remain active for as long as necessary for Hurricane Helene as it impacts Florida and Georgia through Friday morning. And the ARRL West Central Florida section will be activating both the state EOC at Tallahassee and several other points. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The current planned ICS 205 activation on SARNet should be used as the primary communications point except for any sensitive traffic. If using WinLink, formal messaging traffic should be sent to either KA4EOC for ham or NNA4FL for shares. WinLink is monitored as well as configured to automatically forward to the State Watch Office. For HF, 7197 for daytime and 3940 for night primary, KA4EOC and W4UC will share responsibility for monitoring the frequencies. No time has been set to place SARNet in a restricted net or when the HF net will begin, but that information will be shared soon. Activation of the formal nets will not begin until storm impacts start being felt in the state.
Tropical Storm John has been upgraded again to Hurricane John and is producing catastrophic, life-threatening flash flooding and mudslides over portions of southern Mexico. Winds are at 75 miles per hour, and the storm is moving northwest at 6 miles per hour. Through Friday, Hurricane John is expected to produce additional rainfall amounts of 10 to 20 inches across several Mexican states. Additional rainfall of 2 to 4 inches, with locally up to 6 inches, is expected across the Mexican states of Colima and western Oaxaca. When Hurricane John initially made landfall, it left 100,000 residents and businesses without power, uprooted trees and power poles, while ripping off roofs. Hurricane-force winds extend outward up to 10 miles from the storm's center, and tropical storm-force winds extend outward up to 140 miles.
Now celebrating our 25th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
In less than a week, over 275 ARRL members have already taken advantage of a new benefit to help offset their dues and subscriptions. Through a new partnership with Grouper, eligible members who are age 65 plus with a participating Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplement plan can get a paid benefit for being an ARRL member and being active in group activities such as attending the ARRL-affiliated club meetings, hamfests, and participating in other amateur radio gatherings. If you qualify, Grouper will send you an initial payment of $50. For every 3 months of recorded activity, you'll receive an additional $20. To check your eligibility, the only information you need to provide Grouper is the name of your health plan and your age. To see if you're eligible, go to hellogrouper.com/ARRL. Grouper does not have access to the ARRL membership information unless you provide it to them to take advantage of the paid benefits. And Grouper doesn't share your information except to service your benefit. ARRL members with additional questions about the benefit can visit the FAQ from Grouper or contact the ARRL Member Services.
The 105th anniversary of WWV will be celebrated by the WWV Amateur Radio Club, WW0WWV, from September 28, 2024, 000 UTC until October 1st, 2024, 2359 UTC. Club members will operate on CW, sideband, and digital modes across the bands during the 96-hour window. WWV has a history that dates back to the beginning of radio broadcasting. The call letters WWV were assigned to the National Bureau of Standards, now the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, in October 1919. Although the call letters WWV are now synonymous with the broadcasting of time signals, it is unknown why these particular call letters were chosen or assigned. Testing of the station began from Washington, D.C. in May 1920 with the broadcast of Friday evening music concerts that lasted from 8:30 to 11 p.m. Today, WWV operates in the high-frequency portion of the radio spectrum, radiating 10,000 watts on exactly 5 megahertz, 10 megahertz, and 15 megahertz, plus 2,500 watts on 2.5 megahertz and 20 megahertz. Each frequency is broadcast from a separate transmitter. The WWV Amateur Radio Club was created in January 2019 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the station, located near Fort Collins, Colorado, since 1966. After the successful 100th anniversary special event in October 2019, several of the organizers kept the club loosely together, and in the fall of 2020, discussions of rewriting the bylaws began. The club was registered with the state of Colorado as a nonprofit in December 2020, and in April 2021 established new bylaws and elected a reorganized board. The WWV Amateur Radio Club is a recognized ARRL affiliate club as of May 28, 2021. A list of times and frequencies for the 2024 event will be posted on the club's website prior to the start of the September 28th celebration. More history of WWV can be found at History of Radio Station WWV.
In an announcement to the amateur radio community of Canada, Phil A. McBride, VA3QR/HP3QR, Radio Amateurs of Canada President and Chairman, has submitted his resignation. Mr. McBride said in a release that it's with mixed feelings that I announce my resignation as the President of the Radio Amateurs of Canada, effective November 1. While leading Canada's national organization has been the pinnacle of my time as a radio amateur, my family has moved full-time to Panama, and I've secured operating privileges as well as the call sign HP3QR. There is a Parks on the Air entity about an hour from our house that's never been activated, and I plan to fix that. I also plan to become involved with the community's educational program and show youth in my area the wonders of amateur radio. I would like to thank Radio Amateurs of Canada Board, executive, and volunteers for their support during my time as president and previously as regional director. I would also like to thank you, the membership, for your support you have given and continue to give to Radio Amateurs of Canada.
Storm Boris is affecting many countries in Central Europe, currently including Poland, the Czech Republic, Romania, and Austria. 12 people have sadly lost their lives, with several thousands evacuated from their homes. As a response, Krzysztof SP5E, president of the Polish National Society PZK, reports that Polish radio amateurs responding to the flooding are likely to use VHF and UHF for their primary response, but they are also requesting that 3.760 MHz, 7.110 MHz, and 14.300 MHz may also be used. All radio amateurs are asked to keep these emergency center activity frequencies clear if needed for message handling. The effects of the flooding are also being felt along the Danube, with Slovakia and Hungary already seeing rising river levels. The rivers Danube, Elbe, Vistula, and Oder all have catchment region, and river flooding may be seen more widely across parts of Germany, Poland, Hungary, and Romania over the coming days. So again, please listen before transmitting in the area of any of the emergency center of activity frequencies listed above and avoid causing interference to any response activities.
Beginning January 1st, the Radio Society of Great Britain will no longer offer paper-based amateur radio licensing exams, except for special educational needs. Already, 97% of all amateur license exams are conducted online remotely or within a club space. Additional costs and effort around the paper-based exams were cited as the reasons to move to an all-digital format. Here are the key dates. Paper exams continue until December 13th. November 29th is the last day to book a paper exam. Paper exams will no longer be available beginning January 1.
The ARRL field organization is divided geographically into 71 sections. A key volunteer that members in each section elect is the section manager. These ARRL member volunteers take a critical role in being the front line of the organization to members. On Saturday, September 14th, 2024, 13 ARRL section managers gathered at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut for training. ARRL staff members gave them a detailed overview of what the association does on a daily basis and how the resources from headquarters can serve members out in the sections. ARRL Field Services Manager like Mike Walters, WAZY, serves as the point of contact for section managers. These folks have taken on a tremendous responsibility to serve ARRL members and ham radio in general. They're the ones who facilitate the work of the ARRL in the field, and we want to make sure they have every tool available to them, said Walters. After the training, the group activated Maxim Memorial Station W1AW.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
The ARRL this week released an update on the status of the recovery efforts from the recent cyber attack. Two major systems that have not been returned to service include DXCC and our accounting system. Most other systems have returned to full service, and we are working to clean up the stragglers. Our DXCC software was written some 20 years ago. Although an attempt was made 8 years ago to reprogram it to function in a newer environment, that effort was unsuccessful, so the old system remains running today. The complication with bringing it back to service is that it runs on an older version of Windows that is not supported, and more importantly, we cannot purchase adequate protection to return it to service on an internet-based network. We have created an air-gapped network to run the system on and have it operating in a test, using a different method for connecting it to Logbook of the World and Online DXCC, the web service that runs the Online DXCC application. This configuration is being tested, and we expect it can go into production soon. We will work to process the backlog as quickly as possible. There were statements made by an ARRL director about work on a new DXCC system. That is not factual. While we have ideas for merging DXCC and Logbook of the World into a single ARRL radio sport platform, this concept has not been fully spec'd out or put into development. The system we use for accounting was hit hard by the cyber attack. Currently, the system is fully operational and the ARRL Foundation books are in place. ARRL's corporate books are current as of June 30th, 2023, and we are working to load the balance of the data through December 31st, 2023. Once we are certain that the books tie to the audited 2023 financials, we will move to load the 2024 transactions, which are in digital and paper formats. That will take some time, but we will have all the data current in time for the 2025 annual meeting and the annual audit. Another statement was made about ARRL's backups of our IT environment. There was an effort last year to move all our backups into the cloud. That was completed mid-2023. There was a routine discipline of backups that went through mid-May 2024 when the cyber attack occurred. Unfortunately, the entire cloud infrastructure was penetrated and all the environments were deleted, not encrypted. This caused us to revert to other backups that had been made and stored in other places. As a result, we were largely able to continue all our major services, especially publishing our 4 magazines and keeping book projects like ARRL Handbook 101 on schedule. Today, ARRL is using a proprietary system to back up systems and data locally and to the cloud. We are also continuing to use air-gapped, off-site backups in specific areas and are expanding that for disaster recovery purposes. The new IT environment is currently being rolled out, so the assertion that there is something wrong or staff are incompetent is not factual. We appreciate your continued patience and understanding.
Scientists in the Space Weather Prediction Center of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are collaborating with the National Weather Service to update the way solar storms and other space weather is classified. According to an article on the space.com website, the scientists recognize that new knowledge about geomagnetic storms and recent advances in technology require them to revisit ways they look at space weather and its impact on Earth and human space travel. The Space Weather Prediction Center's program coordinator, Bill Murtaugh, explained the need for change during an interview with Space.com, saying, "The user base and needs have changed. The capabilities, the science, and our understanding of the science, a lot has changed. And the scales, for all practical purposes, have not changed, and they need to. Some current scale categories for geomagnetic storms reflect impact on power grids and spacecraft operations, for instance, and others focus on the radio blackouts that have a serious impact on HF radio and navigation systems. Only a week ago, a powerful solar flare ejected from the sun sparked radio blackouts across South America and the mid-Atlantic Ocean. The sunspot responsible for the very strong X4.5 class flare, named sunspot AR3825, also ejected a large plume of solar plasma, which headed in the direction of Earth. When this coronal mass ejection hits the atmosphere, it was expected to spark G3 class geomagnetic storms, leading to the northern lights being visible as far south as California, Missouri, and Colorado, according to spaceweather.com.
All September, the ARRL Amateur Radio Emergency Service has been promoting readiness and resilience for the National Preparedness Month. As we come to the end of the month, the hurricane is churning in the Gulf of Mexico, with forecasts up to 20 feet of storm surge expected. This underscores the need to be prepared. Even experienced hams and those who have been through many disasters have to continually work on their resilience plan. While we have discussed some of the very basic preparedness tips this month, ARRL Director of Emergency Management, Josh Johnston, KE5MHV, hopes you will put your skills, equipment, and other resources into use as a group that can make a difference in your community. If you have the ability, get plugged into a local ARES group, using your resources to assist local responder agencies. Volunteer groups, public service events, and other areas of need are a prime use of amateur radio. ARES members will soon find a great way to practice these skills in controlled situations, such as simulated emergency tests or local communications exercises. On October 5th and 6th, sections will hold a Section Management Emergency Test, or SET, so get involved in your local drill and make a difference in your community through amateur radio.
The Staten Island Technical High School robotics team in Staten Island, New York, took its knowledge and skills to the baseball diamond. John Ross, KD8 IDJ, is here with more on this unique story.
The team created a robot that was capable of throwing a ceremonial first pitch, and in early September, the members were invited to showcase and execute their robot at a Staten Island Ferry Hawks minor league game. But Everton Henriquez, KD2 ZZT, engineering and technology teacher, said there was a major league snag. Approximately 30 minutes before showtime, the team discovered a number of hardware issues that occurred during transport, followed by the complete destruction of the main servo wiring system during subsequent tests. He said cell phones and calls and texts could not handle the communications chaos, so we had to resort to our established amateur radio simplex frequency to coordinate equipment and logistics in those final minutes. The team spread out between the field, the stands, and the merchandise table in the upper deck area, and without radios, there likely would not have been enough time to coordinate efforts to get the job done, but in the end, the team was able to pull it off. As a matter of fact, you can watch the robot's first pitch on the school's Facebook page. All 26 members of the robotics team hold amateur radio licenses with 2 extra class and 3 general licenses mixed in. Cool stuff, reported ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, to the robot's ceremonial first pitch. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Staten Island Technical High School is the first New York City school to receive a grant from ARRL. Goodgame said ARRL has been working with the school to build and equip an amateur radio station, to test and license students, and to put science, technology, engineering, and mathematics kits in the classroom, thanks to a grant from Amateur Radio Digital Communications. Enriquez attended the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology earlier this year. The ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology is a donor-funded professional development program designed to help teachers elevate their STEM programs through the use of wireless technology.
Dale Durham at W5WI has announced that he is retiring from the position of section manager of the ARRL West Texas section. Dale served in this role since July 1st, 2017. He has also served as Section Emergency Coordinator, a field instructor, and an official observer. David Overton, W5JDO, has been appointed to fill the remainder of the current term, which will end June 30th, 2025. David is a ARRL Life member and currently serves as the Section Emergency Coordinator. David has held this role since July of 2017, as well as an assistant section manager and instructor role. He was first licensed in 2013. The appointment will be effective on October 1st.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Coming up, This Week in Amateur Radio is presenting another chapter of A Century of Amateur Radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions, from the mind of Chris Cordella, W2PA, and his editing team. Each episode will bring a different aspect of early amateur radio history. Coming up here on This Week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. I received an email from Bob, K8AAC. Bob had sent an email last week asking about tail ending. He now has a slightly different question. He writes, Bill, you also mentioned in your podcast how important timing is in staying away from the, quote, thundering herd. How do you do that? Well, that's another great question, Bob. If you recall our analogy from last week, we envisioned a press conference where a group of reporters were gathered. When the celebrity says, next question, imagine what he hears. 20 or 30 or more reporters all shouting at the same time. All he can hear is either the loudest or just the din of voices. And maybe several of them listened to the This Week in Amateur Radio podcast last week and were trying tail ending. So what can you do? Well, you might try waiting until the din dies down and then ask your question. Just like a pile-up, watch how he reacts and see if there is an opening at the end. Ever notice that some reporters will throw a question out as the president is turned away and starts to leave the podium? It's the same theory. I've been able to use this before after I hear the pileup die down. There's usually a gap before people realize they haven't been called and they start calling again. And if you can throw it in that gap, you'll have success. Thanks for the email, Bob. Just like tail ending, this works sometimes. For me, actually, it works more often than tail ending, but sometimes it doesn't. It's just another tool for the toolbox. Often people will ask me if there is a written copy of the information that I present. There's so many call signs, dates, and URLs being discussed, you could never remember them until such time as you could write them down. I use most of the same data that you hear in the DX Corner for the weekly DX column in the Ohio Section Journal. If you just Google ARRL Ohio Section, you will find the Ohio Section website and you can subscribe to the weekly journal and get most of this information. The actual website is arrl-ohio.org. This is a free journal, and you don't need to be an ARL member to receive it. You won't get the well-rounded information that you get from the This Week in Amateur Radio podcast, but you will get the DX information that I talk about. So here's what's happening in the world of DX. This section of DX News comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, the only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. So we have a couple of trips going to Rotuma. The first one is being planned by the Rebel DX group with the call sign 3 Delta 2 Victor. The dates are not yet set, but should be soon. FT8 Super Fox is planned on 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters, and MSHV on 160, 80, 60, 40, and 30. Planned frequencies and the QRZ page are being worked up, so stay tuned. And of course, I'll let you know when that's launched. W6IZT, Greg, says that fundraising continues for a planned 3 Delta 2 Yankee operation also to Rotuma, November 15th to December 4th, but says that, quote, we still have a way to go. Most of the gear has been shipped ahead and is now in Fiji. It has cleared customs and is in storage to be transferred to a boat for Rotuma. Donations can be made using PayPal or a debit credit card at their website. The 3Y0 Kilo team reported earlier this past week that they are now in the final stage of negotiating the vessel and helicopter contracts for their 2026 Bouvet Island DXpedition. They have agreed on the important price elements in these contracts and will release more information once they have all the details completed. They wrote, quote, this is a challenging project logistics-wise where vessel and helicopter must be coordinated, and the contracts placed a sufficient amount of time ahead. We have studied various offers for boat and helicopter services in line with the scope of this project. Due to the postponement of the trip from 2025 to 2026, they also had to renegotiate the terms of the contracts. For now, they aim to fully finance this trip up front. Quote, this is a major DXpedition where we will also team up with a small private group to share the cost and the risk for this DXpedition. In addition, the funding of this trip significantly depends on us building a team of 20 operators to finance the budget. We have 14 operators now and are actively looking for another 6 operators to complete the team. As we are approaching the final stage of the negotiations, we are again reaching out to anyone who wants to join our team to participate in this once-in-a-lifetime adventure. We estimate to stay around the island for 21 days, and the total duration of the trip should be around 40 days. Should you wish to join our team, please contact VE3LYC Caesar directly or use his email address. And of course, if you're interested, you can also email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com and I'll hook you up. Separately, for their Peter the First DXpedition, they are still looking for another 3 operators to complete that team. LZ5QZ Ted and LZ1GC Stan are headed to Rarotonga, where they will be QRV as E51SGC from November 7th to the 24th. Listen for them on 1.8 through 50 megahertz, including 60 meters, and the WARC 79 bands on CW, sideband, the digital modes, and RTTY. They will be emphasizing activity on 160, 80, and 60. After that, they'll be heading to the Kingdom of Tonga, where they will be QRV as A35GC from Nuku'alofa from November 25th to December 7th. Equipment will include 2 Kenwood rigs and 2 Yaesu rigs, along with ACOM 120S and ACOM 700S amplifiers. For antennas, they will be using multiband ground planes, a vertical on 160, 80, and 40, monoband verticals, and a DX commander. On top band, they will be transmitting on CW on 1822.5 kHz. On 6 meters, listen for them on CW on 50, 102 kHz, and watch for them on FT8 on 5313. For all activity, they will be operating split. On CW, they will typically listen 1 to 5 up, and on single sideband 5 to 15 up, and on RTTY 2 to 5 up. Luca will be on the air from San Pietro Island, Sardinia as IM0/IK5AEQ September 29 to October 6th, sideband, RTTY, and digital modes on 40 through 2 meters. Now, this is important because if you work the DX Marathon, you may miss Sardinia, and this may be one of your last chances to get it in 2024, so make it a point to do that. A second activity by Luca will be IS0/IK5AEQ from Parks on the Air in the, quote, rare province of Oristano. For confirmations, it's LOTW, Club Log, or to his home QTH. The V7X DXpedition to Marshall Islands by, quote, the Next Generation DXpedition team, who also did 8 Radio 7 X-Ray, are planning this next adventure, expecting to emphasize sideband, RTTY, and FT8. This group expects to have a saltwater-adjacent QTH with plenty of space for antennas. They have a target of 60,000 QSOs and live streaming February 11th to the 23rd, 2025. They are negotiating for the call signs. Planned are 4 simultaneous stations with verticals, spider beam, a DX Commander antenna, and an 80-meter inverted L. LOTW uploads will be daily. Free Bureau and OQRS is also available. From November 1st to the 15th, VK9CB will be on the air from Cocos-Keeling Islands. OM5RW will focus on 160. They will also put an effort in on 6 meters. There won't be any live stream, but they do hope to upload to Club Log daily. Overall, they plan 160 through 6 meter sideband, CW, RTTY, and FT8, and their website is vk9cv.com. Weight and fuel restrictions are major factors. The team hopes that no gear must be left behind in Perth. If that does happen, the gear will be on a flight 4 days later. 6 antennas and feed lines are being shipped ahead to help on that issue. Well, this is one of the downsides and one of the concerns about DXpeditions. We have an update from 6 Oscar, which was the Somalia DXpedition. Quote, good afternoon to all. We apologize for the silence in our communications. Given the very dangerous circumstances in which the entire team found itself, we decided to wait until we arrived in a safe territory to send the information that everyone was waiting for, and obviously to anticipate the feedback, in agreement also with the institutional contacts we have. These operations were canceled, but the whole team is in good health, although mentally very stressed by the traumatic experience that happened to us, although all precautions had been implemented. When you travel the world, the unexpected is just around the corner. The team now is on its way to Europe, end quote. As soon as each operator has arrived home, it will be their pleasure/duty to share with the whole ham radio community our terrible experience in a land where no one is in charge, but at the same time, everyone has a say. We thank everyone for your messages of support. And I think it's easy when we sit back and try to work these guys and then we get frustrated that they're weak or they're not on the band we need. We kind of forget about the peril that they put themselves in. And these guys were saying all along that this was a dangerous DXpedition, that they had some military help, etc., but it will be curious to find out what happened. W7YAQ Bob and K7AR Al will be active from Lascula Guest House on Wallis Island from November 16th to the 29th, 2024, with activity in the CQ Worldwide DX-CW contest. They will be active as FW7AA on 160 through 6 meters using 2 Elecraft K-line stations and amplifiers. They will use a DX Commander Classic, a DX Commander Signature 12, and 160-meter inverted L antennas. Their 6-meter activity will be casual and occasionally CQing and monitoring FT8 on 50.313 when they're not busy or out for dinner. On the return trip, home plans are to stay in Fiji for 3 days, and they will be active from Club Fiji as 3 Delta 2 November Bravo. QSL both call signs via W7YAQ through OQRS and LOTW. A group of Norwegians are headed back to Svalbard. They will be operating as JW9DL, JW6VM, and JW7XK from October 9th to the 14th from the JW5E Club Station Shack. During the Scandinavian Activity Contest, they will be using the call sign JW5 X-Ray. Outside the contest, they will use their own individual calls. Halvard says, quote, JW7XK will be QRV on the RS-44 satellite on CW, sideband, and FT4, end quote. If you are someone who likes podcasts and or YouTube episodes, the DX Mentor has a discussion with Elmar, DF4GV, about the recent T-32 EU de-expedition to Kiribati. Last spring, they discussed the upcoming de-expedition. In this episode, they review the de-expedition, including the working AC generator from the 1930s, the broken arm of one of the de-expeditioners, and the success of the de-expedition. Check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast by searching for The DX Mentor. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my ex-whale Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pile-ups.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
As ARRL continues the September series on National Preparedness Month, we turn to a critical element for radio amateurs and especially radio amateur emergency service volunteers. Here with this week's preparedness details is John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Many hams have a home station from which we operate on a regular basis. Is your station set up to operate or have the ability to operate off-grid or on alternate power sources? There are many ways to set this up and to run on battery power, and could even be done temporarily if you don't have a permanent battery backup situation. ARRL Director of Emergency Management Josh Johnson, KE5MHV, says it is easier than ever now to have a backup. With the new batteries out there and solar technology both improving in quality and decreasing in price, building a resilient station is no longer difficult or expensive, he said. Johnson encourages ham radio operators to think about powering more than just one radio or an alternate power source. Do you have lights that could run off the battery source? Do you have an alternate power source for your computer? What about your internet connection? Is there a backup for it, he asked. Johnson says backup generators are great, but sometimes they only feed certain circuits in your home. Amateurs should test their ham radio to ensure that it is powered by the generator. If the whole house system does not power the station, a portable generator could be an option. The key to the test is the system under the blue sky conditions to ensure that it works. Check for RF noise and potential power drop. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Having backup antennas is also crucial, especially for dealing with storms. It may be useful to have alternative antennas on hand, especially for HF and VHF, said Johnston.
Welcome to the 14th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. I want to thank Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website in the preparation of these programs. Now, here is the next of many chapters of ham radio history. Cooperation and QRM. In mid-February 1916, coincident with Maxim's second article on relaying, one of the first organized relay tests was run. With everyone sharing very little spectrum, cooperation was the only way to avoid QRM, a constant fact of life at the time, and here weak, distant signals. In a rare cooperative operation between an amateur group and the government, a relay test was conducted on Washington's birthday by Colonel W.P. Nicholson, 9XE, at the Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois, and included many other stations. Its straightforward goal was to show the United States government that the amateurs of the United States were in a position to cooperate in radio work by relaying a single message across the country and delivering it to various state governors and city mayors. In preparation, U.S. Navy Station NAA even sent a warning about QRM. A plan was worked out after considering hundreds of suggestions by potential participants, QST noted. Considerably diplomacy was necessary in handling the situation, as a certain amount of jealousy was found to exist between special stations, first-class amateur stations, and the little fellow with the gas engine coil and a few dry batteries. Relay stations' locations and approximate ranges were plotted on a map and covered most of the U.S. except for some of the western desert areas. On 18 February, as the time for the first test approached, QRN at 9XE was the worst in recent memory, surprising considering the season. Besides the static, 9XE reported being bombarded at the start by requests from the press, including the Associated Press, for copies of the message, which he refused to provide until after it was sent. At 11 that night, the text began, and every amateur in the country was quiet. Truly a remarkable thing, he observed. The message: QST, 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 day 9XE, da-di-da-di-da. QST, relay MSG. A democracy requires that a people who govern and educate themselves should be so armed and disciplined that they can protect themselves. Signed, Colonel Nicholson, USA. A group of Boy Scouts helped 3XC receive the Rock Island test message in Philadelphia. The Washington's birthday on Rock Island test was judged a success despite numerous errors in relaying, particularly the spelling of the colonel's name. The message reached the West Coast in 55 minutes, the East Coast in 5 minutes after that, and sooner at various points north and south. Amateurs had bounded the United States in 1 hour that night, an impressive accomplishment. The New York Times reported that the message had been received at Williamsburg, Brooklyn by A.R. Bodar at 1:30 a.m. and would be delivered to the mayor. The exercise, it said, had tested the preparedness and skill of the 25,000 licensed amateur wireless operators. They were only off by a factor of 5. 9XE's account in QST included a collection of reports contributed by participants, some illustrated with small cartoon drawings. Amateurs reported delivering the message to their state governors, some of whom were awakened at 2 a.m. to receive it. Such was the importance of the message in the test. One operator in Washington, D.C., had delivered it personally, written on an ARRL message form to the White House. Maxim star stations, those capable of working 100 miles or more, began to surface along with a large group of regulars. By April, the first trunk line managers had been announced, simultaneously spanning the continents and the generations. Arthur A. Hebert, 2ZH, a 42-year-old steam industry engineer in Nutley, New Jersey, was appointed manager for lines C and D, the two East Coast branches, and 19-year-old R.H.G. Matthews, 9IK of Chicago, would manage Line A, spanning the northern route linking Boston through Chicago to Seattle, and Line E running from Chicago via Houston to Los Angeles. Both men would go on to serve in leadership positions in the ARRL, and one to start a famous radio company. Monday and Thursday nights were designed for trunk line tests, and results were to be reported to HQ. The QST editor predicted big things will now be happening in the American Radio Relay League, and everybody who has a real wireless set and who is a real American will see that he is identified in this linking up of our entire country. No one can afford to be out of it if he has any wireless pretensions whatsoever. The first results of trunk line operation were reported in May in the form of station lists in order of connection, noting where there were gaps and asking for volunteers to fill them. By August, the East Coast lines were complete. The persistent QRM problem led one participant to suggest that the lines ought not to be structured around cities, but around the locations of the best stations. That might result in more reliable critical links and would avoid the QRM of the most populated areas. Included in this material are quotes from the following: 9XE, Washington's Birthday Amateur Relay Message, QST, April 1916, page 65. Air Bear's Message of Preparedness, The New York Times, February 22, 1916. Trunk Line Managers Appointed, QST, April 1916, page 77. A. Hebert, Monthly Report of Trunk Line C&D, QST, May 1916, page 95. With great appreciation to W2PA Chris Cadella for the use of his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
You're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at www.twiar.net.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. As I sit here away from my shack, I'm overlooking a picturesque valley that I'm visiting for a couple of days to see the stars. I learnt recently that my SO, significant other, had never seen the Milky Way with their Mark I eyeball, and we thought that it would be fun to remedy that. One of the challenges in accomplishing this is that we're surrounded by light almost everywhere we go. Street lights, porch lights, car lights, stadium and building lights, traffic lights, even emergency lighting on various towers dotting the landscape. Last night we laid on our backs on a picnic blanket tucked into a sleeping bag looking up at the sky. The valley where we are is pretty good. There's much less light pollution than in the city, but it's not pitch black. We fantasized about knocking on neighbors' doors to ask them to turn off their porch lights, but quickly came to the realization that this was not going to be either acceptable or reasonable. While I entertained the notion of creating a community Milky Way watching event, increasing local awareness of the new moon, light pollution, and making it a local monthly event, I discovered that astrotourism is a thing, and our location happens to be part of the local scene. Of course, I couldn't help myself and started explaining to my SO about how light and radio are the same thing, when it struck me that in our hobby we have a similar issue. We don't refer to it as light pollution. Instead, we call it noise, specifically QRM, or man-made noise, as opposed to QRN, natural noise. I wondered what a community event might look like if we did this with radio amateurs rather than stargazers. How far would we need to go to get away from noise? And could we realistically make something that was actually noise-free? In reality, the radio gear we bring, the power supplies, the solar panels, generators, inverters, computers, and pretty much all the other stuff to make life, come with radio noise to more or less a degree. How could you set up an event where that type of noise was contained? Could it be done? What would it take? On a small scale, I can go to my local park with a fully charged 12-volt battery and a radio and get some sense of what it might look like. But all that really does is whet your appetite. What does this sound like if it's really quiet? For stargazers, there's a project called Dark Sky with a .org website. It documents where designated dark sky places are and promotes the protection of communities from the effects of light pollution through outreach, advocacy, and conservation. We as radio amateurs could do with such a thing. What would our radio quiet spaces look like? How would we find them? How would we coordinate our efforts? And what would outreach, advocacy, and conservation look like for a radio quiet space? From a stargazing perspective, I've experienced the middle of nowhere, Lake King in Western Australia, in a paddock lying in my swag looking up. The sight is overwhelming. I felt like I was falling even though I was lying flat on my back, physically not moving. I wonder what such a level of quiet looks like with a radio. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
The United States House of Representatives is expected to consider a measure that mandates AM radio in all new cars sold in the United States, whether they are manufactured domestically or imported. The bill, known as the AM Radio in Every Vehicle Act, moved to the full floor for lawmakers' consideration following a 45-2 vote in the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Observers say that a House vote could happen as early as the next few weeks before the U.S. elections take place in November, or it could be delayed. The U.S. Senate version of the bill has already been approved by that chamber's Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. It still awaits a full floor vote, but has a majority of lawmakers supporting it on both sides of the aisle. The issue of AM radio's necessity in vehicles has escalated the debate over public safety, as proponents, such as the National Association of Broadcasters and federal emergency officials, have advocated in favor of retaining AM radio for its public safety role, especially when carrying alerts in rural areas. Some manufacturers of electric cars are looking to eliminate AM radio from their vehicles, claiming that RF interference from their cars' electronic systems compromises AM radio reception.
NASA will coordinate the U.S. government stakeholders, partners, and international standards organizations to establish a coordinated lunar time following a policy directive from the White House in April. The agency's Space Communication and Navigation Program, or SCAN, is leading in the effort on creating a coordinated time which will enable a future lunar ecosystem that could be scalable to other locations in our solar system. The lunar time will be determined by a weighted average of atomic clocks at the moon, similar to how scientists calculate Earth's globally recognized coordinated universal time. Exactly where at the moon is still to be determined, since current analysis indicates that atomic clocks placed at the moon's surface will appear to tick faster by microseconds per day. A microsecond is 1/millionth of a second. NASA and its partners are currently researching which mathematical models will be best for establishing a lunar time. To put these numbers into perspective, a hummingbird's wings flap at about 50 times per second. Each flap is about 20,000 microseconds. So, while 56 microseconds may seem minuscule when discussing distance in space, tiny bits of time add up. For something traveling at the speed of light, 56 microseconds is enough time to travel the distance of approximately 168 football fields, said Cheryl Gramling, lead on lunar position, navigation, timing, and standards at NASA headquarters in Washington. If someone is orbiting the moon, an observer on Earth who isn't compensating for the effects of relativity over a day would think that the orbiting astronaut is approximately 168 football fields away from where the astronaut really is. As the agency's Artemis campaign prepares to establish a sustained presence on and around the moon, NASA's SCAN team will establish a time standard at the moon to ensure the critical time difference does not affect the safety of future explorers. The approach to time systems will also be scalable for Mars and other celestial bodies throughout our solar system, enabling long-duration exploration. As the commercial space industry grows and more nations are active at the moon, there is a greater need for time standardization. A shared definition of time is an important part of safe, resilient, and sustainable operations, said Dr. Ben Ashman, navigation lead for lunar relay development, part of NASA's SCAN program. NASA's SCAN program serves as the office for the agency's space communications, operations, and navigation. More than 100 NASA and non-NASA missions rely on SCAN's two networks, the Near Space Network and the Deep Space Network, to support astronauts aboard the International Space Station and future Artemis missions, to monitor Earth's weather and the effects of climate change, and to support lunar exploration and uncover the solar system and beyond.
Indiana will hold its annual statewide communications exercise, 10-4 Day, on Friday, October 4th, 2024. Amateur radio operators and amateur radio emergency service organizations are invited to participate. There will be multiple tasks for both public safety and auxiliary communications to accomplish in a 4-hour time frame. 911 will be involved with the state extent test to ensure that all 911 centers can connect to the state police regional dispatch centers. Each team or individual will be given a set of communication challenges, and then they will self-report their successes accomplished on each task. Staff members will be on site at each of the 10 locations to provide guidance and help answer any questions. Specifically for auxiliary communicators, several other states will be joining 10-4 Day, providing unique opportunities to make contacts. For additional information, contact the Indiana Department of Homeland Security.
Celebrating 25 years of providing the amateur radio community with the latest ham radio news and information, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
The 4th Annual Masonic Lodges on the Air, an amateur radio special event, will be on the air 1400 Zulu to 2200 Zulu, Saturday, September 28th, 2024, from locations across the country. The event is open to all amateur radio operators, and operators do not need to be a Mason to participate. The idea for the event grew out of the realization that many Freemasons also have a love for amateur radio. The Fulton County Amateur Radio Club and the Fulton Lodge No. 248 in Ohio first hosted the event in 2021. Because of its success, the event has now been scheduled for the next 2 years. The event will be operating KBXQ from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time using single sideband only on 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters. All contacts must be in the phone portion of the bands. Stations may be contacted once on each band. Full contest rules and information can be found at cq-morelight.com/rules. Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. We received word from the Facebook GreenCube group and AMSAT UK that GreenCube or IO-117 has ceased functioning. It appears that in a MEO orbit there is a lot of radiation. Other satellites that launched at the same time only lasted a few days. For the time that it did last, it brought many hams a larger footprint satellite and the opportunity to work stations they would not have normally been able to work. Thanks to the S5 lab for a great satellite. There are no plans for a replacement satellite as orbits to MEO are very rare. If you're going to join us for the AMSAT Symposium in Tampa, Florida in October, keep in mind that there's another opportunity to enjoy another one in the UK in October as well. The AMSAT UK Colloquium will take place October 11th through the 13th in Kent's Hall Park, Milton Keynes. More information can be found on the Radio Society of Great Britain website, rsgb.org. You can never say bad things about a vacation that includes some ham radio stuff. The FunCube team announced a new website for processing whole orbit data. You can find it at warehouse.funcube.org.uk. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time once again for this week's solar weather forecast, brought to us each week by solar prognosticator Tad Cook, K7RA, in Seattle, Washington. 7 sunspot groups emerged this week. The first was on September 19th, followed by 3 on September 20th, 1 each on September 22nd and 23rd, and the last on September 25th. The average daily sunspot numbers increased from 120 to 137.2, while the average daily solar flux decreased from 175.7 to 164.3. Geomagnetic numbers were much quieter. The average daily planetary A index dropped from 35.7 to 14.3, and the middle latitude A index went from 23.4 to 10.7. So looking at the predicted solar flux for the near term, it will be 168 on September 29th, 170 on September 30th through October 2nd, 180 on October 3rd, 190 on October 4th through the 6th, 185 on October 7th through the 9th, and 180 on October 10th. Looking now at the predicted planetary A index for the near term, it will be 12 and 10 on September 29th and 30th, 5 on October 1st through the 4th, 10 on October 5th and 6th, 5 on October 7th through the 9th, and 10, 20, and 19 on October 10th through the 12th.
In radio sport this week, more great contests. September 26th, it's the RSGP 80-meter Autumn Series. That is digital. September 28th through the 29th, the CQ Worldwide DX Contest, RIDI. That's digital. Also September 28th and 29th, the Maine QSO Party. That's CW and phone. And don't forget to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming Section, State, and Division Convention, September 28th, the Red River Radio Amateurs Hamfest, sponsoring the ARRL Dakota Division Convention. That's in West Fargo, North Dakota. October 5th, the Wichita Area Hamfest, sponsoring the ARRL Kansas State Convention. That's in Wichita, Kansas. And on October 5th, the North Star Radio Convention, sponsoring the ARRL Minnesota State Convention. That's in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. The Macon County, Missouri Amateur Radio Club, N0PR, will activate special event station W0D to honor Lester Dent, W0CBL, who's now a silent key and prolific writer of pulp fiction. Dent was the creator of the first superhero, Doc Savage. W0D will be active from 1430 UTC on October 19th to 500 UTC on October 21st, 2024, on all bands and all modes, including 28.400, 14.280, 7.250, and 3.950 megahertz. For additional information and stories on Lester Dent and QSL information, visit the Macon County Amateur Radio Club website.
It is time for this week's edition of AMSAT's Satellite Shorts from All Over, and this week we begin with news from NASA. It is reported that NASA astronaut Don Pettit, KD-5MDT, alongside Soyuz commander Alexei Ovchinin and cosmonaut Yvonne Wagner, arrived at the International Space Station Wednesday, September 11th, after launching aboard the Roscosmos Soyuz MS-26 spacecraft from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. The trio will join NASA astronauts Tracy C. Dyson, Mike Barrett, KD-5MU, Matthew Dominic, KC-0TOR, Jeanette Epps, KF-5QNU, Butch Wilmore, and Suni Williams, KD-5BLP, as well as Roscosmos cosmonauts Nikolai Chubb, Alexander Krebenkin, and Oleg Kononenko, RN-3DX. Expedition 72 began on Monday, September 23rd, upon the departure of Dyson, Chubb, and off-going station commander Kononenko, completing a 6-month stay for Dyson and a year-long expedition for Chubb and Kononenko. To wrap up satellite shorts this week, tracking sleuth Scott Tilley, VE7TIL, has discovered that the orbiter for China's Chang'e 6 lunar sample return mission is now parked at the Second Sun-Earth Lagrange, or L2. After delivering the samples to Earth, the orbiter fired its engines to avoid re-entering Earth's atmosphere, setting off on a new trajectory. L2 is located approximately 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, directly on the opposite side of the Earth from the Sun. China's space authorities have yet to provide an update on the orbiter and its plans. However, the Chang'e 6 orbiter's voyage fits into a pattern of China using Chang'e spacecraft for extended missions as tests for future endeavors.
The average age of a global positioning satellite is now 13 years, with half of them exceeding their designed lifespan. The USA-132 satellite broke the record for the oldest GPS satellite in history, having completed 27-plus years in operation. While the record is an indicator of the reliability and robust engineering of the GPS satellites, it also means that the service still relies on hardware built in the 1990s. 31 GPS satellites are in operation today, down from 36 in 2016. The Global Positioning System was primarily designed for military purposes, but was opened up to wide-scale civilian use in 1983. Since then, GPS has grown into one of the most widely used services in the world, with billions of people using GPS on a daily basis today. The overall GPS network still works well, but the aging satellites, coupled with the delays in the launch schedule for new satellites, threaten its competitive edge as international rivals begin into service their own GNSS system and private companies develop alternatives.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
After 47 years, it's little wonder that the hydrazine-powered thrusters of the Voyager 1 used to orient the spacecraft in such a way that its 12-foot diameter antenna always points back toward the Earth are getting somewhat clogged up. As a result, the team has now switched back to the thrusters, which they originally retired back in 2018. The Voyager spacecraft each have 3 sets of thrusters. 2 sets were originally intended for attitude propulsion and 1 for trajectory correction maneuvers, but since leaving the solar system many years ago, Voyager 1's navigational needs have become more basic, allowing all 3 sets to be used effectively interchangeably. The first set was used until 2002, when clogging of the fuel tubes was detected with silicon dioxide from an aging rubber diaphragm in the fuel tank. The second set of attitude propulsion thrusters was subsequently used until 2018, until clogging caused the team to switch to the third and final set. It is this last set that is now more clogged than the second set, with the fuel tube opening reduced from about 0.25 millimeters to 0.035 millimeters. Unlike a few decades ago, the spacecraft is much colder due to energy-conserving methods, complicating the switching of thruster sets. Switching on a cold thruster set could damage it, so it had to be warmed up first with its thruster heaters. The conundrum was where to temporarily borrow power from, as turning off one of the science instruments might be enough to not have it come back online. Ultimately, a main heater was turned off for an hour, allowing the thruster swap to take place and allowing Voyager 1 to breathe a bit more freely for now. Compared to the recent scare involving Voyager 1, where we thought that its computer systems might have died, this matter probably feels more routine to the team in charge. But with a spacecraft that's the furthest removed man-made spacecraft in outer space, nothing is ever truly routine.
The GreenCube satellite, developed by S5 Lab, has likely ceased functioning due to radiation damage. After a successful mission that exceeded expectations, the satellite is no longer responding to commands, and its onboard radio is believed to have been compromised by the harsh radiation environment in medium Earth orbit. Approximately 10 days ago, GreenCube experienced a reboot, and telemetry data from the event did not indicate any anomalies. However, the S5 Lab team now suspects that the satellite's radio was damaged, leading to the current communications blackout. Medium Earth orbit is notoriously challenging for satellites due to its high radiation levels, and GreenCube was not the only satellite affected. Several other CubeSats launched alongside it only lasted a few days, making GreenCube's extended mission duration a remarkable achievement. Despite ongoing efforts to send commands and reactivate the satellite, the team remains pessimistic about restoring GreenCube's functionality. Satellite survival in the hostile MEO environment is seen as a testament to its robust design, but the likelihood of recovery is slim. At this time, no successor to GreenCube is planned, primarily due to the infrequency of launch opportunities to MEO. Launches to this orbit are rare, which complicates the prospect of future missions. In response to the satellite's success and the interest it generated among radio amateurs, S5 Lab has promised to host a webinar in collaboration with AMSAT Italia. The event will provide insights into the GreenCube mission, sharing the challenges and triumphs of the satellite's journey. This is an opportunity for the amateur radio community to learn more about the satellite's impact and the technical details behind its impressive mission. While GreenCube's operational life may have ended, its contributions to satellite technology and amateur radio will be remembered as a significant milestone.
ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, is pleased to announce a partnership with Grouper, the national leader in activity benefit administration. The collaboration between ARRL and Grouper aims to enhance the health of ARRL members by providing access to benefits that support staying active and engaged. Guided by its mission of encouraging healthy living through meaningful social connections, Grouper connects its members to benefits that cover costs associated with group activities by joining Grouper and staying connected through amateur radio. Here with more details is John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this report from League headquarters.
A new ARRL partnership will benefit members 65 years old and older. ARRL is pleased to announce a partnership with Grouper. Grouper provides benefits to ARRL members age 65 plus for staying active in their communities, and these benefits include covering costs associated with your social activity. According to the United States Surgeon General, staying socially active in group activities has proven health benefits and is critical for older Americans who have above average risk of social isolation and depression. For ARRL members with an eligible Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplement plan, you'll receive a $50 check from Grouper. In addition, if you continue to stay active in ARRL activities, such as attending ARRL-affiliated club meetings, getting on the air with friends, going to Hamfest, or even just socializing with other members at the coffee shop, Grouper will send you a $20 social wellness incentive every 3 months. From ARRL contests to field day and radio club meetings, ARRL and amateur radio activities keep our members socially connected and promote a healthier, more fulfilling life. We know you value your community and camaraderie. Let Grouper support those values. If you have questions, contact Grouper's membership engagement team at 833-445-2400 or at info@hellogrouper.com. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Grouper is thrilled to help support ARRL members by offering access to an activity benefit that encourages social connection, said Doug Wenners, Grouper's Chief Executive Officer. This partnership is a natural fit because both organizations understand that social connection builds relationships, encourages involvement, and enhances our communities. Grouper supports ARRL members who are eligible for the activity benefit by helping to offset membership dues and the participation costs associated with their amateur radio activities. Members are then encouraged to remain active so they can receive ongoing activity benefits. ARRL is excited to partner with Grouper to expand opportunities for connection and learning within our community, said ARRL Membership Manager Mark Spardello, W1NJ. This partnership allows us to connect more people who share a passion for amateur radio through ARRL membership and ARRL-affiliated clubs. We'll also reach other Grouper members, inviting them to explore radio communications through ARRL and our engaged community of members. To find out if you qualify for the activity benefit administered by Grouper and to join the social fitness movement, visit https://hellogrouper.com/ARRL. That is hellogrouper.com/ARRL.
The Radio Society of Great Britain convention is just 3 weeks away, and there's a fantastic program planned. Whatever your amateur radio interests or experience, there will be something there for you. In addition to the presentations, you could take part in a workshop to learn more about microcontroller programming. Spaces are limited, so book soon if you want to be part of that event. There'll also be an EMF and EMC clinic, contest forums, and a chance to find out more about the wide range of amateur radio special interest groups. The social side of the convention is important, too, whether you're catching up with friends over coffee or enjoying the gala dinner on Saturday evening. Day or weekend tickets for the convention are still cheaper if you buy in advance rather than at the door, and the deadline for the advance tickets is Monday, October 7th. To find out more about the program, the speakers, and to book your tickets, go to the rsgb.org/convention.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
Celebrating the dawn of mass global communication, a centenary event will be reenacted in October 2024 by amateur radio operators in New Zealand and the United Kingdom. The first transglobal two-way radio communication was achieved on October 18, 1924, by amateur radio operators Frank Bell, 4AA, a sheep farmer in Shag Valley, South Island, New Zealand, and Cecil Goyder, 2SZ, a student operating from Mill Hill School, North London. 2 special call signs will be in operation for this year's event. At Millville and Shag Valley, stations on October 18, radio amateurs will recreate and reenact the first contact, hopefully on a frequency close to that used in 1924. In addition, 2 other amateur radio stations with call signs reflecting the centenary will be active. GB2NZ will be operated from September 29th through October 26th from a number of United Kingdom locations. ZM100DX will be operated from early September 2024 through December 26th from a number of New Zealand locations on CW, SSB, and a number of other modes. Awards and QSL cards will be available for those who make contact with these special stations. For additional information, visit www.gb2nz.com. That's www.golfbravo2novemberzulu.com.
New Zealand's Women Amateur Radio Operators Group has ceased to exist. After attempting to survive some troubled years, the organization's executive committee voted in 2020 to go into recess, citing a lack of support from the membership. According to the website of the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the group's creation in 1962 arose from a need to address special requirements of YLs at a time when very few female licensees were on the air. An announcement in YL Harmonics, the bi-monthly newsletter of the YLRL, confirms that the group will exist now only for social purposes and will retain its call sign ZL6YL. Nagier Jury, ZL2UJT, wrote in the newsletter that a vote was taken to continue with social activities without any fees. The new group has adopted the name the NZYL Group.
NASA astronaut Sunita Williams, KD5PLB, has taken the helm of the International Space Station as its new commander, as she and fellow crew members Butch Wilmore await their return to Earth in February 2025. The pair's mission aboard the ISS was supposed to last only 8 days following their arrival via Boeing Starliner, but complications with the spacecraft delayed their departure and Starliner returned to Earth crewless. By the time the duo returns home aboard the SpaceX Dragon capsule, they will have been in space 8 months. This is Williams' second time as commander of the ISS.
Volunteers are the heart and soul of ARRL headquarters. And to tell us more, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ.
ARRL is quite privileged to have the service of many member volunteers. Your national association could not function without the tens of thousands of dedicated hams who give freely of their time and talents to serve the greater amateur radio community. The ARRL field organization is comprised entirely of volunteers. Section managers, affiliated club coordinators, emergency coordinators, and all other positions are filled by those who have stepped up for the task. In central Connecticut, where ARRL is located, we enjoy a dedicated group of volunteers who come to ARRL headquarters to serve. The volunteers really keep this place functioning, said ARRL Member Service Representative Chantel Holly. Holly coordinates the volunteers in her role as ARRL's receptionist. They're always happy to be here and bring so much dedication to their service, she said. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
ARRL is sincerely grateful to the headquarters volunteer team. If you come to visit ARRL headquarters and the Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Station, W1AW, please join us in thanking this great crew who serve in many different functions, including W1AW, ARRL Library, the QSL Bureau, and the ARRL Laboratory.
When Bob Berninga, WB4APR, became a silent key in February of 2022, he left behind the legacy of the Automatic Packet Reporting System, APRS, which the pioneering amateur had developed. The APRS Foundation was formed later that same year to ensure that APRS would be preserved and advanced so it could continue its vital role enabling real-time tracking over the amateur frequencies. Hams are now able to support the APRS Foundation by becoming members. The $20 membership helps the foundation with operating costs and assists in the continuation of Bob's work. The foundation also encourages participation online in APRS at groups.io and the APRS Special Interest Group Email Reflector. The foundation's president, Jeff Hochberg, W4JEW, writes on the foundation's website that continued engagement of amateurs will help APRS out of what he describes a precarious position. Jeff writes, while there are undoubtedly thousands of APRS users worldwide, the number does not seem to grow as it used to. For more information about the foundation, visit aprsfoundation.org.
The MESAT-1 command and commissioning teams wish to thank all that have routinely or even occasionally collected telemetry from MESAT-1. Thanks to these reports, the teams are able to make informed and timely decisions about what, when, why, and how to do the next steps in collaborating with the satellite owners to help with their primary mission. Much is being learned about this new satellite, the University of Maine's first CubeSat, and AMSAT's linear transponder on board. All of the lessons learned will help inform future missions that carry the linear transponder module and the Golf series of satellites. Reports about transponder activities are very helpful as well. Please continue to collect telemetry. We continue to work on taking and downloading Earth images from their cameras. In recent days, we are having the satellite send image blocks both in the mornings and evenings. We expect that to continue in the near future. The transmitter could be on for 5 minutes or perhaps even 10 minutes when over the East Coast command stations. Every frame helps us to build an image. Testing is intermittent, but it seems to be more regular right now. When the images aren't being transmitted, MESAT-1 is in safe mode, sending a couple of frames about every 2 minutes. These frames are very important too. As we come to air, MESAT-1 was in health mode, transmitting telemetry continuously, and the beacon setting is pretty strong as of 11:43 UTC on September 19, 2024. The linear transponder was enabled at 0050 UTC on September 20, 2024. Watch the AMSAT bulletin board for announcements regarding MESAT-1 status.
Produced by amateurs, for amateurs, and originating from Albany, New York, you're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
And finally this week, in case you are one state shy of worked all states, and in case that one state happens to be Wyoming, look no further than the W7Y special event. The Shy Y Amateur Radio Club has organized this annual event, which it calls Come and Get Wyoming. Whether you're a DX station or here in the U.S., if you need a Wyoming contact on a specific band or in a certain mode, this is your chance. Hams throughout Wyoming have been volunteering at least 1 hour of their time since the 21st of September to make sure as many contacts can be made before the event ends on Monday the 30th of the month. QSL details and a little history of the W7Y special event can be found on QRZ.com while there's still time.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard all around the world on the amateur bands, and on great repeater systems like the KB3 CNN Gateway FM Association repeater, on 146.730 MHz every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m., covering the wide area of western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. If your repeater system carries This Week in Amateur Radio, let us know via email, and we will mention your station in an upcoming edition. Send your information to w2xbs77@gmail.com.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.